what's up guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. So for this video, I wanted to do a quick head-to-head comparison between two of the most significant releases that Grand Seiko put out this year, in my humble opinion. On the left-hand side, I have the recently released limited edition SLGA007, also known as the Lake Suwa. And then to the right here, another recent release from Grand Seiko this year. This is the SLGH005, also known as the White Birch. Now in hand, I can tell you that both watches feel very similar. That is because they weigh about the same, coming in at about 173 grams sized up for my wrist. And they also share similar designs with respect to their case and bracelets. The similarities continue when you factor in pricing. The Lake Suwa here comes in with a price tag of about 11,300 Canadian dollars, and the White Birch comes in with a slightly higher price tag at 11,800 Canadian. The slight increase is because the White Birch utilizes their new in-house high beat automatic movement, and the Lake Suwa utilizes their latest spring drive caliber. So Grand Seiko tends to position their pricing that their high beats typically cost a little bit more than the respective spring drive. So let's quickly crunch the numbers on both timepieces because they do actually have very similar footprints. So total case diameter for both is 40 millimeters. The overall length, so that's the lug to lug for both watches, comes in at 46.4 millimeters. And then if you flip to the side, case thickness is fairly similar. The White Birch I measure at 11.8 millimeters in total thickness on my calipers, and the Lake Suwa is actually slightly thicker, coming in at 12.1 millimeters. Both watches have sapphire crystals on the front and back of the watch, and both also have a 22 millimeter lug opening for their supplied OEM bracelet, and bracelets taper down to about 20 mil when you hit the clasp. Both watches have screw-down crowns and 100 meters of water resistance. And both are getting increasingly hard to find actually. The Lake Suwa is a limited edition piece with only 2021 made, and the Grand Seiko White Birch is not limited, but it is getting scarce on the market. So let's spend some time with the Lake Suwa, just so you can actually see where these watches do differ. So of course you have this gorgeous blue colorway that has a slightly textured wave dial. And this wave dial motif is meant to represent Lake Suwa in Japan, close to the manufacturing facility for Grand Seiko. And these gold accents, so the gold GS printing on the logo, and also the gold seconds hand, is meant to represent the sunlight that reflects off of Lake Suwa. Now close to the 6 o'clock position, you can see the text Spring Drive in 5 days. So this does utilize their new in-house caliber 9RA2, which is a 38 joule movement, of course does have 5 days or 120 hours of power reserve, and the accuracy has been enhanced even over old spring drive models, which were already crazy accurate. This watch only deviates to about half a second per day, or they spec it at no more than plus or minus 10 seconds per month. Now a very subtle distinction before I flip the watch over to show you guys the movement is that this crown isn't as recessed into the case as it is on the White Birch, in my opinion. They are similar in diameter. It's a 6.8 millimeter crown, so very good size. But on the White Birch, I think you'll see it's sunken into the case just a little bit more and doesn't protrude as much. And then taking a look at the bracelet constructions, both of these watches use a similar 3-link bracelet, nice beveled edges, and it's pretty much pure satin finish on the tops, polished flanks, and then this Grand Seiko logo at the level of a clasp for the Lake Suwa is different because it is done in 18 karat gold, I believe. Whereas for the White Birch, it's only done in stainless steel along with the rest of the case and bracelet. Taking a look at the see-through sapphire caseback, you can actually see the Grand Seiko Spring Drive 9RA2 in all its glory. They did a really good job decorating this movement. You can see that they opened up the oscillating rotor weight so you can actually take a good look at the power reserve indicator, which is on the back, which is phenomenal. And you can see Grand Seiko is actually listening to consumer feedback. A lot of people didn't like having the power reserve on the front and breaking up the symmetry of the dial. And here's a quick wrist shot of how the Grand Seiko Lake Suwa sits on my 7.5-inch wrist. And if you're using the metric measurements, that's a total wrist circumference of 19 centimeters. And I really love that Grand Seiko made these movements thinner than past iterations. You can actually see that there's no bump in the case back, so it sits very flat and planted on the wrist. And it is extremely comfortable with the broader 22mm lug opening. Okay, so let's transition now to the white birch, which is a timepiece that I actually did a full review of on my YouTube channel. You can scroll through the archives to actually check out all the information on this particular timepiece. But you can see the naming convention for the white birch does come from this highly texturized silvery white dial that has vertical striations that mimic birch bark on a tree, although technically birch bark on a real birch tree does actually run horizontally. Now you can see that the Grand Seiko logo is done in silver, and the only color accent is the thermally blued seconds hand that also has a very nice sweep to it. Not as refined as the spring drive, but this is a high beat movement that ticks away at 10 beats per second. So the sweep is fairly good, and it does actually indicate that it's a high beat 36,080 hours of power reserve on the dial closer to the 6 o'clock position. If we do take a close look at the crown, you can see what I mean where it's actually slightly recessed into the case of the white birch more than it is on the Lake Suwa. Aside from that though, the case design is fairly similar. Very nice Zaratsu polished bevels on the side, drilled lugs, and a nice arcing case profile. And the case back is fairly flat as well. Now flipping this watch over, you're greeted with the new 9S-A5 movement, which is a 47 joule movement, does have 80 hours of power reserve, and the tolerances for this watch is spec'd at between +5 and -3 seconds per day on average. But I do think it's more technically advanced because they generated a dual impulse escapement, which you can actually see that balance wheel just going crazy right there. I do think that the decoration on this movement is better than on the spring drive, and you can see the rotor weight again, nicely hollowed out. There's a full balance bridge you can see, and there's really nice striping on all of the plates, and the jewels are really well done in decoration too. And here's a quick wrist shot of how the white birch sits on my 7.5-inch wrist. And again, the wearing experience is really identical to the Lake Suwa. In fact, if you just had this watch under the sleeve, I couldn't tell you if this was going to be the white birch or the Lake Suwa. Although anecdotally, there is a little bit of rotor wobble when you consider the 9S-A5 over the 9R-A2 spring drive movement, but that's very subtle, and I don't even think most people would notice. And some closing thoughts. It's interesting because visually side by side, I do think that the white birch actually looks a little bit bigger than the Lake Suwa, even though they do have the same case diameter. And it's likely due just to the highly texturized and white dial versus having a darker dial with the Lake Suwa. But guys, at the end of the day, I do hope this is a helpful tool for you if you're trying to decide between purchasing either one watch over the other. Please do tell me in the description of this video which one you prefer and why. And if you guys are wondering which one I prefer, there is one clear choice. And for me, it's going to be both.